But I'm following. I usually try to follow the time. We'll see. Okay. A nowe bluzy są po prostu katastrofa. Te bluzy są...
It's each year.
It's just...
Each year it's the same. I hate it.
No, I did.
Last year I was there as a speaker.
But I don't remember having the same problem last year with the blouse.
Exactly the same problem last year because I had the black vest and I put it on myself.
And whatever. I need to wash it the first time and I'll be good. No, nie pomyślałem, że takie coś bym musiał zabrać ze sobą. Boże.
Okay, so let's begin another talk. The topic of this talk is colorful deployments. In this talk, we will learn about different deployment strategies, how to introduce fully automated CI/CD flow by leveraging containers combined with 21st century cluster management hidden in the last version of OpenShift. Talk is presented by Maciej Szulik from Red Hat.
Yeah.
Don't forget to post your feedback and votes for this session.
Hi, welcome. I'm going to start my talk with a few. I'm sorry for my voice. I just couldn't handle that, but apparently the weather isn't good to me, and it's just happening the second time for me in a row. Second of all, you can find me. My name is Maciej Szulik, but generally you can find me under SOTUS everywhere in the internet. And today's talk will be about deployments. So let me start with a simple question. One, actually that will be three. How many of you actually deployed some application, be that a production application or your pet toy application or whatever, to a server? Okay, there's a few. How many of you are from the operations team? Okay. How many are developers? Assuming the rest? Okay, I'm not going to be covering the rest, but I'm going to focus on the interchange between the two of them. Okay, so let's start with some ground. Continuous integration, continuous deployment, because that's what we will be talking about. Continuous integration. We all know, and we obviously all do continuous integration, right? Right. Okay, that's a good start. I'm gonna shoot you a coffee just for the ride. See, you can get more of this if you're gonna interact with me more. Just to encourage you to talk to me more. I don't want to be the one talking about. So continuous integration is about building our application, running the entire test suite, and making sure this process, that part of the process, is working as expected. And we're using either Jenkins, Bamboo, Travis, or some other tool that is available out there, right? Right. Yeah. I see a few more heads nodding. But the second part of the process is continuous D, and the D stands for delivery or deployment. How many of you think it's for delivery? How many of you thinks about deployment? Okay, and the rest doesn't know? Okay, so it's a common misconception between the two. Delivery is about producing an artifact, be that a RPM, zip, tar, a Docker image, whatever, that you can then take and deploy into your production. Whereas the continuous deployment process goes all the way to the final step, meaning not even producing the artifact, but actually deploying the artifact on your test environment, production environment, or whichever environment you have. Just to show you that I'm not lying, this is a quote from Martin Fowler. If you don't know him, you should totally check him. He writes really good stuff about deployments and generally about application architectures. So that's not something that I come up with. This is the proper definition of continuous deployment versus delivery. And since the title of my talk is Color for Deployment, we will obviously be talking about the full automation, starting from build all the way to deploying the application to a production or test environment. Of course, I'm not going to focus too much on the building part, because that's pretty simple and you already know how to do that. So let me start you with a simple story that happened a while ago when Flick was bought by Yahoo. So Yahoo didn't like the approach that Flickr take, that they were releasing their software very often, like several times a day. So CTO of Flick was talking with some management from Yahoo, and they told him, like, listen, this is not how it works at Yahoo. You've got to stop that. So they make a bet that they are going to, that Flickr is going to continue their strategy, and at the same time they will be monitoring how things are going. After about a week, they check the results, and apparently the responses times and the availability times for the Flickr services were much higher than the core Yahoo services. That means the process that they were doing, meaning continuous delivery, continuous deployment, was actually working much more efficiently than the stable, very slow, very tested processes that Yahoo already had in place. So, what we want to get actually from the continuous deployment approach. So, first of all, we obviously want to deliver more features. More features means more customers, more happy customers. More happy customers means more money, obviously, and this is what we're one of the points that we're targeting for. Repeatability. We obviously want to make sure that our application always works. We will go forward in the direction of making sure that every deployment works as expected. Because what we care about is we prefer to deploy more often, deploy smaller bits of our application, smaller features, and respond to what's happening with our application. So whenever there's a problem, I don't know, we just introduce some small feature. And for some reason, the entire testing passed, and we released it to production, and then we find a small bug. So it's easier with a small deployment to actually make a quick fix and deploy that once again instead of rolling back the feature, because it's faster and the deployment process is tested so many times because we are doing it over and over, possibly several times a day, that it's easier to deploy a newer version with that fix in instead of rolling back. Because rollbacks, as you probably know, are always painful. If something is going to happen, it is usually going to happen during the rollback process. It's not as stable as actual deployment. That's why we rather go in the direction of continuously deploying. Obviously, we want to minimize the downtime of when we're deploying the application. With bigger changes, there will be some changes to data structures, to different components that will force us to perform that will force us to make some downtime. And obviously, the lower the downtime is, the better for us. The best approach is when the downtime is close to zero, right? And I'm going to be talking about that in a minute. And obviously, you want to reduce the risk. There's nothing better than not having the risk at all. And this is what I was talking about. It's better to do over and over deployments because the process is so well tested because it's performed so many times instead of doing the rollbacks, because the rollbacks are just a safety belt that you use from time to time. Okay, so let's start with the core part of the talk, which is the deployment strategies. Okay, I'm going to start with the blue-green. How many of you heard about the blue-green deployments? Oh, that's cool. So basically the blue-green deployment, it's all about having two identical environments. That is one of the requirements. then we need some layer that allows us to switch from one environment to the other. That will be a load balancer or some routing layer, whatever you're comfortable with. But there's also one additional requirement, and that basically applies to all the deployment strategies that I'll be talking throughout this talk, is N-1 compatibility. Just the fact that we're running two applications at the same time, two versions of application at the same time, requires us to work with the newer schema and the older one as well. That means that when we're changing database schema in any way, we need to do it gradually in such a way that we're adding new fields. The application has to work properly with the limited set because it won't know about the new ones. But at the new application, we'll be properly setting the new fields. So this is very important. So gradually you're modifying how the structure of your data kept within the application is moving. And this is very hard to achieve in very simple, but generally we want to make our API stable, and this is what we do for our customers. This is the same that we will have to do for ourselves when we are performing any type of continuous deployment. So to illustrate the process, we have 9 replicas of the blue application that is currently running, serving the request, perfectly fine. The green one is where we're deploying, and it is like identical 1-to-1, identical environment that where we upload the new version of the application. During the time that the entire traffic is served through the blue deployment, we can perform the entire test suite and whatever you need to feel comfortable that the newer version of the application is working as expected. When, for example, our quality assurance department will say this is good, we just make the simple switch. And bang, we're actually serving the newer version of the application. Any questions so far? Okay, let me show you a simple demo how this works in OpenShift. Okay, now I'm gonna be tough because I need to switch. Yes. Okay, I'm very lazy, but the examples I'm showing you are on my GitHub account. There's a step-by-step process how to run those, and actually it's not that hard because the setup thing, it just creates a project, creates 2 deployments, and by default I'm serving the entire traffic to the blue deployment. Okay, I need to turn my mic. It's hard to give him some time. I do hope it will work. Okay, we have three pods running each of the deployments. One is called blue and the other one is called green. I can do a simple get. I'm very lazy. But basically this is the blue serving for us. And there's, it's not. Probably this is because it's not full screen. Oh, see this traffic? There's a nice indication that the entire traffic is currently served by the blue deployment. Unfortunately, there's no simple yet way of changing that from here. So I need to go to routes and modify that one. Although I already filled in a request to actually switch that. This is OpenShift origin master from before yesterday or something like that. I'm usually a very hard code person, and since I work on a daily basis on OpenShift and Kubernetes, for me it's just simple. I just compile I just compile the binary, and this is what you basically see. I'm gonna show you that in a minute. See, that's how simple it is to switch from blue to green, and I have 2 of them running. I'm gonna do full screen to show again that the entire traffic is now switched from left to right. We're gonna reuse that traffic control a little bit more once again in a few, but for now That's what we want. Oh, to show you which version I'm running. This is like 1.5.0 alpha, whatever. This is the commit probably from 2 days or 3 days ago, more or less. Yeah, I don't care about running old or new. Okay, we need to go back to the presentation. Where's my mouse? Good. That was deployment. That was a demo. Did you like it?
Yeah.
Who nodded the most? Raise your hand. Okay, yeah. Just because you raise your hand, here's the coffee. Enjoy. Okay, let's get moving forward. To summarize the blue-green deployments, let's talk about the pros and cons of this approach. Obviously, the best feature about it is it's completely zero downtime. It's almost instantaneous. The users will not even notice when I switch from one environment to the other one, because the previous request might be served by the old environment, but his next request will be immediately forwarded to the new environment. This is so very nice for us because there's no zero. This is like totally almost the ideal word, because the downtime is close to zero. Obviously, there will be some problems, some lost transaction due to the switch. So if somebody will be in the middle of transaction, there will be some transaction that will be lost. So you need to be aware of that one, unfortunately. But the good side about it is that just because we have twin environments, we can actually perform the entire testing suite inside or on production. How many of you would love to do the entire testing in production, right? This is something that is not usual that you do. And at the same time gives you a lot of confidence about the stability and the healthiness of the new application, right? Besides, although I mentioned before that the rollbacks are not recommended, it's so easy to roll back, right? If I want to go back because something messed up so totally, so badly that I don't want to continue with the newer version, switching back to the older environment at the same time is so easy, because I'm just changing my router or load balancer. Go back. I don't want to. There's something wrong going on. Of course, about the downsides, aside from the lost transaction, there are data migration problems. The thing that I was talking before about N-1 compatibility problem. When you want to do a migrations, you need to be aware that there are two applications running at the same time. Both of them are operating on those data, which is a very problematic thing. And unfortunately the cost, because obviously having two identical environments means twice as much cost for having those environments in place. Obviously, with cloud solutions such as GCE, Amazon, or the like, the cost will be limited, because we will only set up this amount of an environment for a short period of time. I don't know, day 2, 3 for the time of the actual deployment, and then we will keep it for some time after the deployment, after the switch happened, just to make sure that just in case if something breaks terribly, there's a path that we can go back.
Excuse me, a question.
Yeah.
Why the transaction is lost? You are not doing off the server, you are just switching the...
Yeah, but your transaction is currently being served by one application instance. And in a matter of time, you're switching from one environment to a totally different environment. There are certain transactions that will be, I'm not saying that everything, but when somebody will be in the middle, yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, WebSockets or something like that. Just for being brave and raising your hand, here's a coupon. Maybe that encourages others to ask more questions. I still have a few coupons, and my talk is going to happen for another 30 minutes or so. So, keep on asking questions. I like talking with you guys.
Yeah. Apart from the coupons, can you scale blue or green deployments? as in you're shifting your traffic to
Yeah.
to a different environment.
Yes.
And you like to save or conserve resources. So it would be wise to maybe scale it up or down a bit.
So there, well, the pure blue-green deployment is what I showed you just now. There are different variations because the other deployment strategies that I'll be talking about and just starting now with canaries are a variation of the blue-green deployments where you're actually defining how much of the traffic is being served by the new application. This is what canary is actually doing, meaning that I'm deploying my application, but the newer version is available only to a certain group of people. The certain group of people is decided by a feature toggle. The best feature toggle that is available out there is currently implemented by Facebook. I've talked with a friend of mine, he's an engineer at Facebook. It is called Gatekeeper. You can find some materials around the internet about the Gatekeeper. Basically, the Gatekeeper is implemented in such a way that it allows you to specify gender, age, country of origin, and a lot of more, to whom the new application will be targeted for. There was a super nice article, and made me so laugh when I read about it. Last year, about September or October, the newspapers in Poland were so excited because the new feature was tested by the Polish and only Polish. And I was like, yeah, obviously they are doing that on every single day, basically, with every single feature. It just happened that they decided that the Polish will be the ones testing this particular feature. It's not something that we're super special or anything like that. They are doing that on every daily basis. I got a question after my talk on PyCon-PL about that. How would I implement that? So my original answer to that was that I would rather have the feature toggle being a separate application. But after talking to the Facebook engineer, he told me, because I asked him if there's a chance that they will ever release the Gatekeeper. What he told me is that the Gatekeeper is so tied to the entire infrastructure that Facebook is running that it will be almost impossible to make it as a standalone application. It knows so much about how the application is running. So after talking to him, my answer to eventual future questions as such will be that you want to tie that to your application in such a way that it can allow you to give a better feedback. Because obviously, first of all, you're deploying newer version of the application just to a small group of people. But you also want to get a feedback from those people. So you need to monitor that group even more than you do the majority of your application. So yeah, that's the illustration of the very simplistic illustration of how the canary deployment can be achieved. Are there any questions about canary deployments? Yes, there will be demo on the next slide. Let's do the demo then. Okay, I would need to have like two heads. One will be here and the other one will be the other direction. And let me remind you, if you go to my GitHub account, which is, I'm going to show you my username once again because it's hard to remember. There are all those samples there, easy to run on OpenShift. So the setup is pretty much the same as before. I wanted to show what the setup does. Yeah. The setup just creates a project, then it creates two deployments, and by default I'm targeting 100% of the traffic to the prod deployment. Let's do a get. Okay, it's working. And I want to show you the console. I need to go back home. There's the canary project. Let's switch to full screen again because we want to see the traffic. So, and now, the current implementation of the router that we have in OpenShift is very simplistic. It allows you to, it obviously allows me to just specify the percent of the traffic that is going in one or the other direction. So that's what I'm going to leverage here. I'm going to decide that every 10th, and now I'm going to do, we're going to go off this full screen because I want to show you that. See? Approximately every 10th request hits the new canary deployment, the newer version of the application. Obviously, OpenShift is built in such a way that it's very easy to actually provide your own load balancer or your own router that will allow you to do some more sophisticated routing rules. The current one that I'm showing is very simplistic. That's just basically every 10th request hits the newer application. We can switch that to 20% or something like that, and it should work. Should, more or less. Whatever. Okay. Let's do half. Okay, let's do half. I didn't test the half, but it should work.
Isn't that because there are much less holes in the canary?
It might be that. It might be that. Because the service works as a load balancer in here, and it decides that it. But I could replicate.
Maybe that would work.
What again?
Try 5%. That should work.
Well, we can.
10 works. So then.
We can. I don't see any problem if you want to bump that to, I don't know, 3.
So that was actually the previous question about if you can somehow tie
Works.
the scaling of pods to the toggle for switching between environments, because usually this
you want to correlate that
traffic
with
that you're distributing between two environments should correlate to the resources back
behind it. Yeah. So currently I'm not sure if there is such option. The manual probably is what I would say. There's the auto-scaling options, but obviously auto-scaling auto-scaling might work actually, because it will never hit the load balancer. Will always know that there's just one currently, so it won't work. Right. Sorry. There's a question in the back, and I'm gonna give you the coffee just because you asked the question, and you're the first person in the back. It's a question.
The question is, can you explain how what's going on in Origin versus Kubernetes services and label selectors on the service?
The question is, what's the difference between Origin
services? You can do this canarying
Yeah.
deployment just depending on the labels you're using.
Yes.
Pods and
Yes.
service selectors.
Yes.
So I just wanted to, is there something different going on here, or is it sort of possible?
So so in front of all that, because what I currently deployed is, there are 2 deployments. One is canary, the other is prod. On top of that, every of those deployments has a service, and the service is always full into whatever is behind that deployment. And then on top of that, we have the routing layer, and the routing layer is actually deciding how the traffic goes. So combining the 2 probably would be what you were interested in. But yeah, with the services is one thing, but the problem with services is that services do not expose the traffic outside. Services only expose the traffic internally within the cluster. We still need something like a route in OpenShift. In Kubernetes it is called egress, and we'll be eventually moving to egress as well with OpenShift. So that's basically how it works. Okay, we're going back to our discussion. We're pretty good with time. So that was the canary. Yes?
So what configurations are you mentioning? Like, how do you tell the router to switch between services? Is there a new framework?
How do I tell Kubernetes to switch what? The traffic.
How do you tell the router the route's configuration to switch?
the thing that I was showing you about how to modify, I was actually modifying a route. The route that is exposing those two services. So there's prod service and there's canary service, and I'm just modifying the route configuration, how it should deal the traffic between those two services.
And it can be more than two?
What again?
Can it be more than two services?
You can have as many as you want. I'm not sure how this works. The question was, can there be more than two services? I bet, yeah. There shouldn't be any problem. We can actually see the row YAM definition of the route. So there should be something that will tell us. Yeah, there is something that is called. So there is the main service, and there's alternate backends. So the alternate backends, if I remember correctly, and from what I see, is an array of different services that you can route your traffic. I'm not sure how the routing division of the traffic will happen when there are more than one alternate traffic, but there's no problem in actually playing with that. It's very simple example, as you saw, as I showed you. It's as simple as setting up one in 30 seconds. Okay. Go back. We're back to the summary of the canary deployment. So, what is good about the canary deployment is definitely the gradual verification. Just because we're deploying the application only partially, meaning partially here means that only a certain group of users is seeing it, we are able to see if the application is properly deployed, if it's working as expected. It's easier to, again, roll back, but I still would not recommend it. It's easier to get feedback eventually about the smaller, the newer application at a smaller scale. It's easier to eventually address some problems. And only a certain group of users would actually suffer if something really bad happened, right? And obviously, reducing the risks that I was talking earlier today is one of the reasons for that. The feature toggle is the coolest thing about this approach, especially the gatekeeper that Facebook does. That is so nice. I still have some reading about that. Unfortunately, the usual problems arise, meaning that data migrations, N-1 compatibility, and dealing with multiple versions of your application running at the same time, right? The biggest probably challenge is actually how to apply Canary to a desktop or mobile application. It's almost impossible to do so. Obviously, the Canary is something that you can only apply to a pure web application because you control the traffic in a reasonable way. With a mobile or desktop, that will be very hard. Okay, the last deployment that I'll be talking about is the default strategy that we have in OpenShift. It is called deployment. It basically requires you to have N+1 instances of your application running at any point in time. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that with a simple picture as usual. And the N-1 compatibility problems applies as well with that. So here's the simplest possible picture that is showing how a rolling deployment is working. On the left we have an old application, on the right there's a newer one. So at any point in time there's always N+1 instances of my application running. And how many of new applications is running at any point in time can be easily defined by deployment strategy parameters in OpenShift. Are there any questions? You're very shy, I must say. Okay, demo. I just need to figure out where I am. Oh, this guy is still hitting that one. We're heading to Rawling, if I type it correctly. Of course, there's setup again. That is just creating a simple deployment. Let's head to our application. That will take some time. It has to spin up 9 pods. It's currently, I don't know, 30 pods running on my machine. It's not that big, but it works. Okay, we have the application fully running. I want to do get on that. Okay, so it's very simplistic. It just prints hello OpenShift, right? And now I'm gonna need yet another screen probably. Let me think. How can I fit in? Oh yes, works. Rawling. Okay, my update script is not very sophisticated. All it will do is modify the description that is returned by the application. But that change is seen by OpenShift as a configuration change. A configuration change immediately triggers a new deployment. It can be turned off, obviously, but for the purpose of my experiment, I'm obviously turning that thing on. So, and we should be seeing how my current approach is that they are changing one by one, basically. There's the simplest approach. I don't think I have any sophisticated deployment parameters set for that particular one, but it'll take a bit. Hopefully, it should work.
Can I tell the OpenShift to spin up the new cluster and then start destroying the old one, so to effectively?
What do you mean by the question was? Can I tell OpenShift to destroy to spin up a new cluster and then the new application? You're saying about a new application. Cluster is the entire thing. You don't want to destroy the cluster. That's a totally different thing. Yeah. Well, the thing is, let me show you. It'll take him some time. But let's see, and we can see the new are here. Let us see the, okay, where is the edit? Okay, I'm blind. So, here is the deployment strategy configuration. You can specify how long is the timeout between different rollouts. How many of unavailable pods you are able to work for you, or how many pods that should be deployed of the newer application. So with configuring that, you can basically achieve what you were asking for, and that's what I would go for. I haven't played that much. I don't see Mihalis here. He was working hard on the deployment on our side, but basically that's what you would do to properly set the requirements so that they match whatever you were asking for. Are there any other questions?
Just a comment. This is actually called recreate, right?
What again?
Recreate strategy, because he wants to create a new one.
Well, recreate is different. Yes, that recreate is one option as well. But the problem with recreate is that it just destroys the entire and starts from scratch. So not always is recreate what you want, because you will with recreate you will actually get a downtime, and that's not what you want, obviously. Unless your recreate is okay when you're doing that with the blue-green deployment approach, because then you can recreate from scratch a new environment, and that is fine. Are there any other questions? I still have a few coupons. I'm gonna have more coffee myself if you don't want to. Coffee is really great here. Okay, let's get back to the presentation. You sure you don't have any questions? Yes.
Let's say I have an OpenShift enterprise installation going on, and it's 3.4.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's time to update to 3.5, or at least consider it. What deployment strategy do you recommend for that?
the deployment strategy for deploying OpenShift is one that we're actually thinking how to do properly currently. There are so many problems and rather challenges that we face with the cluster, especially when the cluster is really big. That is probably the one of the biggest challenge, and the time needed to update every single node, it's quite significant. We're working really hard to address those problems currently. I probably would go, we'll probably go with similar approach that Kube has, meaning that first of all you update the master and then every single node one by one. I'm not sure what the final approach will be. I'm not part of the installer team that is responsible for that. I'm usually working with just those core parts. Yes.
Are there any other questions?
So about the upgrades, is Commissar in the future plans somewhere for OpenShift?
It is one of the key features that we're working on, to have the installer to be, because obviously the thing that we're talking about, the application to be OpenShift to be able to run and serve the applications continuously. We want to maintain the same thing for our customers who are for whom we provided those solutions. So yes, that's one of very important topics for us. Okay, so quick summary of the Rawling deployment is on the good side, you have a incremental rollout. So during the time how your new application is being rolled out, similar to Canary, you can verify the application if it's running properly or not. You get the gradual verification because over time you're basically throwing more and more traffic at the newer version of the application, and eventually if for some reason the performance of the new application will be not sufficient, you can stop the rolling actually at any point in time and fix that, redeploy the newer version, and then continue with the rolling approach. As a downside, the N+1 instances, but compared to what blue-green requires, having the entire identical environment, it is probably a better approach. The lost transaction, unfortunately, is something that we will be always facing during the continuous deployments. It's hard to mitigate in any way. To summarize my entire talk, there's no silver bullet. There's no one approach fits all possibilities. As usual, you need to know what you're dealing with. But it's very important to understand what are the good sides and the bad sides. It's very important, and the most important thing is that both developers who are working actively on the application and the operation team cooperate very heavily. Because for things like N+1 and monitoring, compared to previous versions, what is better, what is worse, and if the worst is something that we can actually mitigate or fix, because maybe there's some. I was just starting up 30 containers, and the difference between Docker 1.10, that was even before 1.10. I'm not sure if that was even all the way back to 1.8 or 1.9, and Origin different versions. How over time we're actually taking a lot more into starting containers.
Okay.
And that's something that you just, as an application developer, you need to think of and have a dedicated team to actually work on those problems.
Yeah, that's what I said. Everybody probably doesn't have that, but I understand that. Thank you. But that's cool. Great talk. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Mówisz po polsku?
Tak.
Mam pytanie, panie Miszek.
Macie.
Świetna świetna prezentacja. Mamy w firmie aplikację, która jest monolitem, wielki monolit. Pytanie, czy jest sens wrzucanie tego do OpenShifta, żeby przetestować, czy najpierw musielibyśmy rozbić to na...
Nie, jak najbardziej.
Jak najbardziej.
Nie ma żadnego problemu. Nikt ci nie powie, że w OpenShifcie działają tylko mikroserwisy, to jest droga.
Da się konfigurować w taki sposób, żeby miał kilka midów z Dockera, powiedzmy, nie wiem, jedną na bazę danych, którą by nie odtwarzał przy każdym komicie?
Tak.
Nie ma...
No, wiesz co, no, w twoim wypadku skończyłoby się to tak. Miałbyś osobny deployment, który byłby odpowiedzialny za bazę danych. Chociaż w przypadku bazy danych kontenery cały czas nie są jakoś tam super dobrze wspierane. Niby już rzeczywiście z 3.4 już to jest dużo lepiej ze storage'em, ale może ja nie widzę problemu na przykład, jeżeli macie już